Everyone will take your seats and get settled in. We'll be quick. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're delighted to have you today. As I often introduce Jane Carey as St. Paul's favorite therapist, it's true. We love Jane Carey at St. Paul's, a local therapist in practice here for many, many years, and a longtime friend of St. Paul's. I'll say a bit more about how we got to this conversation today, but I thought we'd begin with the prayer. It's one of my favorite collects of the prayer book, and it's one I pull out usually in kind of times of crisis in the world, but I think it fits for our day and human relationships that we'll be talking about today. It's the prayer for the human family. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. O God, you have made us in your image and redeemed us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love and work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth, that in your good time all nations and peoples may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Among many other things that Jane does for us at St. Paul's is she helps us with oftentimes 2 pre-wedding conferences a year. And we love that time. Those of us who work on the team always look forward to it. And Jane really is the anchor of that day, gives lots of good information to the young couples who are coming to us to be married in the church. And one of the topics we inevitably always strike upon is Valentine's Day. And so that's why we're having this conversation now. And we've talked about for years, wouldn't it be nice to have like a marriage workshop on near Valentine's Day, if for nothing else, for people to be here and make cards. I'll have Jane say a word about that in a minute. But as we began thinking and talking about this day, we decided it makes sense just to broaden the conversation about human relationships in general, about how we maintain, how we strengthen, how we nurture our human relationships, whether they be with friends, with partners, with spouses, with family members, in these really challenging times. They've been challenging for all of us. So that's the basis of this conversation today. I'll ask Jane to tell her Valentine's story, years of experience of people sitting on her couch after Valentine's Day. But be thinking about questions that you have for Jane. So with that beginning, Jane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Warren. It's always a pleasure to be here. And in thinking about coming, I was thinking, I don't have answers, but I have a lot of ideas and some suggestions. So I hope that you leave with something that's helpful. That's my wish for you today. And in going along with what Warren was talking about in terms of trying times, I think I believe in the midst of trying times, it's really important to think about that balance of joy and sorrow, and what have now these past 2 years coming up on going into the third brought to us in terms of our strengths, to really look at what are our strengths right now, always, but particularly right now when we're just kind of, it's like hit with what we're losing and what has been taken away from us. So that's someplace I'd like to go as we continue our conversation today. But I want to share with you the little piece that Warren always enjoys, and it is humorous, but it's also telling. When I talk with the couples, I talk about celebrating holidays, that that's really important as a couple to celebrate, and that anniversaries are in my mind like the kind of a high holiday that you really want to be celebrating your anniversary, along with birthdays, I think. But Valentine's Day, in our practice, our therapy office, the couple of us who work together for years have talked about starting right after Christmas. We begin to hear the stories about, he never gets me a card. is she gonna come to, mostly it's he doesn't, sorry guys, but usually that's the way it goes. But it's the worry and the wondering and the how's it gonna go, and last year, so here comes the past. Last year was a disaster, and I remember that one year I said, all I want is this one thing. So I tell the young couples and the couples I work with, get the card. Like, it's not that hard. In fact, I brought some samples with me. Trader Joe's for $1, okay, has lovely, they have many to pick from, but get the card. Like, it's not that hard. One of the things, as Warren said, we talked about was we could make the card, and that way, we would ensure that people would have the card. But, so I say to you now, on February 6th, get the card. You've got plenty of time. They come out after Christmas. The stores are full of hearts and cards and all things Valentine's. So, anyway, that's the piece that sort of got us thinking about how much, what that represents in a relationship in terms of expectation, wishes, dreams, hopes, and being known and being seen and being understood. Like, this is important to me. Even though we know it's a Hallmark holiday, granted, it is somebody's making a ton of money, okay? Wouldn't be Trader Joe's for $1, but somebody's making a lot of money on this. However, it's part of our culture. And, unless you're, even those who are off the grid, it's out there. You have to be blind to not see that. Even then, there's Braille, right? So, it's available. And again, I think it just points to what our wishes are in relationship and what our hopes are. And during these past few years, that's really been up for grabs because everything has changed. Everything. My husband loves to say this. I'm like, okay, here we go again. Everything has changed, Jane. Everything has changed. I'm like, that's right, everything has changed. So what are we gonna do about it? And he's a man who doesn't like change, so this has really been troublesome for him. Not that it hasn't been for all of us, but we talk, and I think, and I talk with my clients about what has this time brought us in terms of, again, the same vessel that holds joy holds sorrow. We have to have both. To the degree that you have sorrow, you have room for joy. And in my home, one of the things that we've realized is that because we were both working before, we now have dinner together every night, which we never did, and we really look forward to it. That was not that we never did, but less frequently because of work schedules. So, and there's other things. Time together, and as I talk to people, and perhaps you've experienced this, people talk about time with their kids, time with family, pods that you've created back when we needed pods. Hopefully that time is past, but how well you get to know those people and trust them and rely on them. So I think it's important to look at what we're grateful for, even in times of loss and deprivation. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was a poem, and I don't remember the name of it, but the poet is Joy Harjo, who's for the third year in a row our national poet laureate. And it was about what comes to us through the years and how we carry with us legacy. And it made me think, and it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, about my own legacy, my Irish heritage, and my ancestors, either fleeing the famine or hopefully making it through the famine, and also the wars and the depression. And I thought to myself, okay, this is really hard. The pandemic there's no question about it, but we have, most of us, many thousands and thousands. Now I think it's what, 900,000. I think we've lost. We've lost. But many people have found their way. And how is that? How did we find our way? We came together. We got smarter about some things. We were more careful. We gave things up that we found out we didn't even really need so much or as much of, like travel every week, you know, and hopping on a plane every month, some people. Anyway, that's kind of where I'd like to begin today, and Oren, maybe you might have some thoughts about that.
Well, I was just, as you were talking about gratitude, I remember one of the things we did last year during Lent were our blessing boxes, and I'm astounded at how powerful that was of an experience for people. And again, the exercise was just to sit down at dinner every evening and write out a list. What kinds of things happened today that we're thankful for? So instead of sort of focusing on the sadness and the heaviness of the time, to be reminded that even in the midst of that time, joy and sorrow, that there's this balance, and that joy can be found in Thanksgiving. So,
Right. Yeah, and the small things. I mean, we do that at dinner at night. We used to say that, I grew up Catholic, and so we had, you know, bless us the Lord and these thy gifts, that prayer was very routine. And so we used to say that, and my husband grew up Catholic, but not like I did. You know, kind of light. We were not light, like we lived down the street from the church and, you know, Catholic school and all. But at any rate, he was like, you know, this prayer doesn't really mean anything to me. And I realized after, you know, decades, it meant less to me too. It was so routine. So we spend a little time, what are we grateful for? And often it's as simple as I had a great walk today, or I ran into so-and-so. I mean, it doesn't have to be grand. And in you know, I guess yesteryear's terms, grand has changed. But it's a good practice to start the day and end the day with what am I grateful for? What am I, you know, maybe anticipating in the day as well? And to sum that up at the end of the day, what brought me joy today? What helped me stay grounded today? What helped me keep positive today? The good in us and the good in the world is something that we really have to focus on. Our brains don't go there. We have a bias towards the negative. Our ancestral limbic brains, you know, we look for the lions and tigers and bears. And if you allow that to lead you, you'll find them. And certainly right now. So it's really important to shift. It's like jumping a neurological track and reminding yourself, wait a minute, what has come to me that is useful to me? What have I learned about myself? What have I learned about the world? What have I learned about my partner? My children.
Can you remind us, Jane, of that ratio in terms of our brain about how many positive things we need?
2 to 5, yeah.
2 to 5.
The Gottmans, and you can look them up, John and, I shouldn't say I always forget, Marcia, I think. He was a scientist, actually a mathematician turned clinician, and the two of them and their clinic out in the Northwest really took marriage therapy and made it more of a science over the last 20, 30 years. He has a ton of research out. If you're interested, look up the Gottmans, the Gottman Institute online, and you'll get a whole plethora of books and research. But they came up with a ratio of 2 to 5, that we need 5 positive interactions, words, phrases, to make up for 2 negative. So that tells you a lot, that we don't pay attention. And this is also in the research, you know, no surprise, for kids in school. You know, they need a lot more positive, and at home, a lot more positive to make up for the negative. And we're inclined to go with it. We remember, again, that piece of our brain remembers the negative. And we don't remember the positive. You know, people will always say, they maybe came out of an interview and all these positives, or more commonly a review at work, and all kinds of positive things could be said and shared. But what they remember are the 2 negative things. We sometimes even want and dwell on it and dig deep and find reason to, you know, I mean, like all kinds of inappropriate behavior can come from that. So, looked like you had a question or a thought.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have.
Yes.
So, could you talk a little bit about how technology has been positive for our relationships, whether that's with a spouse or partner or child, or has been negative for, I love when you talk about that in our pre-wedding conference. So.
Yeah, well, one of the things I always say is put down the phone. The phone has become an appendage, and we're not going to be without it. It's a wonderful thing. When I say phone, I mean any kind of, the iPad, computer, whatever. But it is like a third person in relationships, and I really encourage people to have dinner. And to some of you, this may be just second nature, but it isn't, sadly, for everyone. To have dinner without computers around, turn them off. Like that little ding, it sets the cortisol level up. We're like, oh, we gotta respond. I mean, we're all now so charged and activated by, either looking at a news piece or a current text or email, or hearing it, so that we are compelled to look at it. There's no question about the value of the information we have at our fingertips. Often it's bad. It can lead to a bad consequence. I mean, people, the doctors will say all the time, please don't get on the internet when I tell you this, because you're going to find everything. Medications. Who hasn't gotten a medication? A couple of years ago, I had bronchitis, and I got online, and I was like, I'm not taking this medication. He's crazy. I'm not. He said, do you want to live? I was like, okay, all right, I guess I do have to take his medication. And of course, nothing untoward happened. But again, we look for the negative, and I don't want to get into the politics of the world right now, because there's no end to that, and I don't know. I mean, it's not pretty out there. But that's another, I think, downside is the misinformation that is out there that has led people to a lot of really dangerous behavior and beliefs. So again, it's the good and the bad, and how do you ferret it out? One thing is to limit your time, to help limit the time that your children and grandchildren have, which is not an easy thing. I mean, I have talked to so many parents who feel so horrible about the time that their kids have spent online through the pandemic. It has been a blessing in many ways. This is how some people have been able to work at home, is to let go of that, a priori, or I should say, before time expectation of only an hour a day, or only 2. I mean, that has gone out the window. So again, it's managing it so it doesn't run our lives. I don't know if that answers enough what you were asking.
I have a positive technology story. Early in the pandemic, I'm not sure what possessed me to do that, but I think it was sort of this inner need to feel to connect to people who were important to me that I perhaps were neglecting. And so I've started once a month, I have a Zoom call with my godfather, who is someone who I hadn't seen in a long time or spent much time with, and a work colleague from decades ago. And I can't tell you how life affirming and joyful it has been, to hear stories about my parents that I never knew before, or someone who knew them when they were young, to be reminded of these work relationships and the things that we have been through together, and how that can inform life now. So that's that, and I'm the least technical person around, the last you would think to go there, but it's been really a source of joy and thanksgiving for me. And Jen, we have lots of conversations at work here about technology, and ideally we want people sitting in chairs and sitting in the church, and we realize that we value that experience when we worship together. There's no substitute for that. But by the same token, we hear story after story of people who are connecting to us virtually that perhaps might not ever connect. I mean, one just quick anecdote is that we have a Wednesday noon service at 12 o'clock. It lasts a half an hour. On a good pre-pandemic Wednesday, we might have had 12 people in the chapel. We have 50 people watching this this midweek service now. so that something is happening. We are making those connections. And so our solution at this point, or how we're going forward, is that we'll always have that option.
That's right.
Be in person and connected.
Well, the accessibility that technology has offered us, and I know for my own practice, like everybody, I immediately went to virtual, and precious few people have asked for in-person. Because it's easier for them too. I mean, they can get offline and go right into the kitchen and start dinner. They don't have to deal with parking. They don't have to, get dressed to come to the office. It has made a difference. Is there a loss? I was involved with a workshop, a meeting of many therapists, again online, so they were from all over the world, and most said they felt like the connection was in many ways better. People are in their homes and more comfortable. And you kind of get a glimpse into their home, and they get a glimpse into your home. I mean, it's funny how many people are like, oh, I love the color of your walls. Okay, can we talk about what's going on in your world? So it again, it's both. It's both. Yes.
There's one standardized test that's used a lot for measuring.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'll remove.
Thank you. Yes.
And there's one standardized test that's used a lot for measuring emotional intelligence. Full disclosure, I came out as borderline Asperger's, but it involves looking only at eyes and evaluating what the expression is in the eyes. And that's pretty much the world that we're in now with masks. And do you find your own acuity getting better in that regard?
I'm sorry, I have to ask you to repeat that question.
Do you find your own acuity getting better at reading eye expressions under current circumstances?
I thank you for bringing that up. I do remember reading about, since we're all in masks so often, how the eyes express so much. Since it's virtual, I do see the whole face. I think the eyes have always, obviously, have always expressed a lot. But I do think that as we walk around with masks on, there is a lot to noticing. I mean, that's one way you recognize people is, the eyes. So I can't say that myself, that acuity has grown since I still am seeing the whole face. But I do agree with that.
It seems as though it puts a lot of people at a disadvantage because they don't have the benefit of body language.
Right.
Or the balance of the expression.
That's right.
So
That's right.
this is in terms of a lot of sociability and the normal range of
Right.
human capabilities. This has
Yeah.
created a deficit for a great many people. And for
Right.
developmental stages, that's going to be particularly profound.
Right. Well, if I'm hearing you right, the limited socialization in general is I was just reading an article this morning about socialization and mobility in older people, and by older I mean 60 and above, through the pandemic, that there's research now coming out on. No surprise that people stopped going to the gym, people stopped going to doctor's appointments, people stopped going to grocery stores. So even just casual, everyday movement began to be limited. And how that's showing up 2 years later, I mean, the older you get, a year or two makes a huge difference. And people are having all kinds of aches and pains that they may not have that might not have arisen as soon. I mean, aches and pains come with age, but if they continued to be as mobile as they had been, even just going to the grocery store, going to doctor's appointments, going out for, dinner. So there's so many ways, again, that this time has impacted from, the whole gamut from babies. Now we have a generation that has only known the pandemic. And that will show up just like the generation that only knew the Depression. This will show up. What will that mean? I don't know. I don't know what that will mean. I mean, you can venture some guesses. The research is beginning to come out on that. Kids are showing up in school 2 years later who don't have the facility that kids prior had in terms of being able to socialize, being able to interact. So it is showing up all over the place, and it will. I have a lot of faith in my field, in science, in technology, that we will, we'll learn, we'll override. Just like we have, look at what we know about treatment and approach to the virus now that we didn't know a few years ago. Even with the current virus, or the current variant rather, thank goodness, more transmissible, yes, but less virulent. And particularly since it was so transmissible, or has been. So this is evolving, of course, as life does. And so I have faith that there will be approaches and techniques and tools to help guide us and help us find our way. But it's a slog some days. It's day labor, yes.
Just a comment, the self-disclosure before I make the comment. We left this morning to come to church, and we weren't far from the house, and I had left my phone at home. And I felt this huge loss.
Yes.
Although my Jane reminds me when we walk into the church to turn your phone off. There's nothing more irritating than phones, going off in the middle of service or other types of things like that. But so I kind of thought about, we are really attached to those things. But one of the things I think we found during this pandemic that kind of, I will say, may have strengthened our relationship some is that we started walking.
Yes.
And we would walk pretty much daily, probably about 4 times a week. Now we live in a neighborhood, we don't live in Alexandria, that's got miles of asphalt walking paths.
Right.
And we live in a wooded area, so
Excellent.
it's beautiful.
Even better. Yes.
Yeah, it's lovely. And so we found that averaging, maybe 2 miles or so a day. Just being together. Usually she'd tell me, stop talking.
Right. Jane, I have to tell you, not many women can say that to their husbands. Okay. Yeah. There's some out there, but mostly it's like, you have anything to say?
And of course I immediately pay attention, stop talking. But that was, and now we both, you mentioned aches and pains of getting older. She's got some sciatica, I've got some tendonitis in my Achilles, so our walking has decreased. We haven't walked very much, and we miss that, don't we? And
don't we, Jane?
Yes, we do.
Be honest, Jane.
So that's a sort of, I think that is a positive coming from this going on, as you said, 3 years of this pandemic where we're kind of cloistered into our own communities and our own homes and very initially, the first year and a half, very careful on what we did, where we went, those kinds of things. I think because we're sort of human, we're getting tired of that, so we're taking more risks.
Yep.
But at the same time, science is also showing us that, with vaccinations and boosting and those kinds of things, you can take more risks.
That's right. If you're vaxxed to the max, you can figure that out. So a couple things. Thank you, first of all, for sharing. And the walking, so many people, so I would just make a suggestion to you. Well, first of all, no surprise you're getting aches and pains. You're doing something maybe more, I don't know, than you did before. And like, PT is the answer to all of that. So, yeah. Right. And some adjunct moves, because you're going like this, so you need to move in a different direction. But the number of people who are walking more, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful. And to have woods, there's a lot of research on that as well, like time spent in nature, moving. So you got time spent in nature and moving. Huge boost to your immune system, and lowering the cortisol levels, so that the appendage of the phone you may find easier to put aside. But in response to that as well, I think so many people feel that panic when the phone is not available to them. It's like, oh my God, where's my phone? And you have sister-in-law always says, panic first. She can't find her phone. Panic first. Where did it go? So I thank you for sharing all of that.
I did get some comfort when I looked over and saw that she had her phone. So.
Yeah, that's right. There's one in the family. Yes. Sounds like Jane keeps on track.
Jane, you mentioned a moment ago children, and could you tell some stories or share some experience about helping with parenting, folks coming to you at this point, the challenge of having children at home and working, and perhaps even elderly parents to be responsible for?
Right, all that sandwiching that goes on. Well, first of all, I can't tell you how many people I see who are in their car because everybody has been at home. So they've got to go to their car for our session to have any privacy. So that's right there is a statement and says a lot. And everyone apologizes. I mean, you're not alone, believe me. Lots of people are doing this. And it's a relief though for people because they're finally alone. I mean, as much as, we want to commune and be together, there's all of this forced togetherness. So it's sort of that old song, how can I miss you if you never go away? It's like, like a little breathing room is a good thing. And so there's that. And I was reading an article a couple weeks ago in the Times about these moms, this group of moms went to a park and just screamed. And I thought about, I think it's Van Gogh's picture of the scream. Is it Van Gogh's? I think it is. Is anybody?
Oh, it's
Thank you. Yes, I thought we're going to have for this generation, for this time right now, a new scream picture. But here's all these moms just screaming because they got, they had all this time with no time to themselves. So there's that piece of no time to themselves. And then the kids needing socialization and not getting it. So yes. Parents are really struggling. And to spell each other, in terms of work. So everybody's at home, and if both both parents are working, everybody's online. And as I said earlier, now what do you do with the kids? Especially if you're home, you're having to, they're at home online. Many kids, particularly young kids, weren't able to maneuver that and negotiate that at all without some help. So it was really, less so now, the kids are back in school, most of them are doing okay, better, and now the teachers are really having to catch up. I have actually teachers / parents, of course, many of them are parents as well, but the teachers are really, my heart goes out to the teachers, and God knows we need to pay them more. I mean, they are just really struggling because now the teaching gets set aside because they have to socialize these kids and deal with aberrant behavior. And I use the word aberrant not frequently because what's aberrant, but it is now aberrant in school. Kids just are not, they're not coming in with the skills, or they've lost them. So, back to home, the parents have to deal with all of that all the time. Time alone is useful. Sleep, if anybody, and Warren, you've heard me say this how many times, it's good sleep, good nutrition, good exercise. Front line, no matter what's going on, it will save you, it will keep you strong, it will help you figure things out. So those three things, plus supporting each other and having people you can talk to, whether it's a good friend or a sibling or a parent or a spouse, or you seek help outside. It's really has been. Again, to your point, it is getting, slowly better, and we hope it continues to go in that direction. And we've learned a lot to prepare ourselves, because this is probably not the end of viruses. This is the world we live in, and then we get to the bigger picture of what we've done to the earth. So we're going to see more of this, and our generations to come are going to see more of this. They will know more. They will know more. We already know more. So that's a good thing. I don't know if I answered enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, going back to a comment you made earlier, which is human beings' propensity to remember the negative,
Yes.
and in relationships. So, what are good coping mechanisms? So, if you're in a relationship or you're having a conversation, people are going back to the negative. What's a way to cope or handle or to bring the positive out?
Right. Good question. Yes.
As
Yes.
people have been living in their own minds, and
Right.
there's been a lot of solitary dwelling on
Yes.
things over the past
Too much.
10 years.
Too much. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
How do you,
Yeah.
what tools would you suggest to cope with that? Or-
Right. So start with the positive. That's the best way to begin those conversations. If you start with a positive, you're planting seeds for more positive. You're setting up the brain to receive positive. So, perfect example. And this is in the research more true for women, because often women are the ones who begin these conversations. Not always, perhaps not. I don't know. And there are those, where but to start, a soft approach. So to use maybe a pet name, if you have those, and to talk about what's happened currently that's been, I really appreciate XYZ that happened the other day or that happened this morning. There's this thing I want to talk about, but that was so great, and it reminded me that we need to address this, whatever this is, this new piece. So to start with a positive, and to really focus on it, so it's not just a swipe on the phone, but you're installing it. Like, wasn't that great the way we handled that the other day? I really appreciated that you were able to say or do A, B, C, D. Expressing gratitude and complimenting and holding up a snapshot when it goes right, because we all need that. We all need instructions on what it is our partner means by it helps me when you say or when you do. So when it goes right, you really want to zero in on that. We mostly pay attention to when it goes wrong, and that's often, to your point, where we begin. Like the other day, that made me so mad. Not a good place to start. You want to start with the positive. Take deep breaths before you begin. Like take a little walk around the house. Really literally like wipe off any negative that you're feeling, kind of shake it off. There's a physical, visceral experience, a bodily, mind-body experience of like letting it go. So you can begin where, on a positive note and truly feel it. And ask for that, like what, so you start with something positive. What do you think in terms of that experience? What was good about that for you? So it does another thing, which is it extends the conversation and not extract, that's the wrong word, but extends is the best word I can come up with for this moment, and it infuses the conversation with a different tone. In a different direction even. So it's not about scolding or warning or, I told you so. It's more about what do we share that's good that we can feed. So it's a different, so I was listening this morning to, I don't know if any of you are familiar with On Being with Krista Tippett. I love that show. And it's on NPR and you can get it online. Anyway, she had a fellow on today, and his whole approach is asset reframing. Did anybody else say it? I think it's asset reframing is the name of it. But it's basically like looking at how things are presented. Again, negatively. Now he's talking in a very global way, and it's worth listening to. If Trayvon Short, I think is his name. Anyway, he is talking about this. I mean, he goes to big corporations and helps people with this. But you can, it applies across the board. Starting with positive, like how do we start with the positive? What brought you to this person to begin with? To remind ourselves. Keep a little list. I tell the to-be newlyweds, write a little list of the things that brought you to this person that are positive and they get reinforced over time. Keep it in your pocket. Remind yourself and share it. Share it from time to time. So that we don't lose sight of the good. There's a reason you chose this person. Out of all the people you could have chosen, there's a reason, even when you say to yourself, what was I thinking? which, let's face it, I mean, we all get there, and sometimes frequently. And we all fail. We fail, like miserably, and hopefully we sometimes say, I'm sorry for that. But this is the nature of human beings. We try to go back in and try. Does that give you some ideas?
No, I think that's a good, I appreciate that in terms of tools to use. I think that's really helpful.
But, so one other thing along those lines is to remember that you can always start again. You can always start again. There's very few things in this world, relationship-wise, that don't allow you to begin again. I mean, look at the couples who after years, I always like to tell this story about, again, it was this Gottman couple I mentioned before. I was watching years ago an interview they had with this couple, and this is back before the technology we have now, and they were taping and videoing it outside of the room, and this couple, they were talking about the research was likelihood to divorce, and so they had this couple, talking about their difficulties, and something happened with the video machine, the tools they had at the time, and so they had to call time out. And the couple's in the room with magazines, and they're just sitting there. So they're in the, at the height of this argument, right? And called a stop to it, and working on the machinery, come back, and so they said to the couple, okay, start again. And they couldn't remember what they were fighting about. And it just goes to show, right? Like how quickly, we can forget, we can begin anew, we can start again. So as soon as you feel, and we all feel it, I mean, it never feels good in a couple. And remember, that's true for both of you, even though you may not see it. Nobody feels good when things are off. It's just like this. There's, again, a visceral chemistry to it. It's like, ugh, this feels terrible. This is not how I want us to be or me to feel, and what's going to happen. I thought we had this trip planned. I mean, you start to think about your whole life ahead. What am I going to live alone? Like you go down these terrible paths. So to bring yourself back and say, wait a minute, this is not who we are. Let's start again. I'm going to walk out and walk back in, and let's start again. Maybe you even switch places, or maybe you move someplace else to talk about it, so that you really give yourself a visual that's different. All right, so one other thing is novelty. Novelty in relationship and life is really important. To that end, walking, like where you walk, like you got to sometimes change it up. Even the like I said before, even the physical way that you walk. Like I always like to tell people, like walk sideways just for a few steps to get the side of your body, and it's likewise for your brain. You have to like reconnect pieces of your brain, and visually that helps to visually change where you're at. To sit and notice visually where you're at, but to begin again, to correct. My bad, let's start again. I'm really, so the best things you can say to someone, honey, I think you're right. Better than I love you, honey, I think you're right. So.
And applicable, all of these things to friendship, to workplace, I mean, all of these things can really help improve our health and maintain relationships across the board.
That's right.
One other piece, and then I think we do need to close. Could you tell us a bit about how poor we are at mind reading, and how helpful it is to communicate?
Right. So, and this I was thinking about this morning as I was listening to this, again, this asset reframing. Our ability to assess what someone else is, well, our ability to really be good assessors of our own behavior is really bad. I mean, the research on that is we are terrible assessors of our own behaviors, our own, like what we think we have done, and then you get feedback from someone else who's like, oh, is that what you're talking about? You're not talking about me. So to think that we can mind read is just so erroneous. So to stop and ask, and I always say that, well, did you ask? Did you check that out? Like, I'm sure he's thinking, or I know what he's going to say. Really? Really? I mean, for sure, for 100% sure, I mean, we may be able, we could be, right in terms of along the lines of, but to be absolutely 100% accurate, no. So to stop and check it out is hugely important. And how easy is that? How easy is it to be kind? How easy is it, maybe less easy, to be patient? And how easy is it to ask, is this what you were thinking? This is what I heard, is this what you meant? To just check it out. Likewise with our kids. I always remember, my daughter assured me, if you don't hear from me, I am not on the side of the road kidnapped. I promise you. So recently, I hadn't heard from her, and we text back and forth. And I was like, just tell me you're alive. Or no, I didn't go that far. I said, please tell me you're okay. She wrote, Mom, you did not get my email. I'm okay. Remember, I'm not on the side of the road. So check it out.
Well, you see why Jane Carey is St. Paul's favorite there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.